Hello and welcome. Secrecy, Syncretism and Synodality. As more details of the October Synod emerge, so does a clearer sense of its priorities. On the 30th of September, the Synod will begin with an ecumenical vigil. A host of ecumenical guests have been invited, and much is being made of the fact that the Synod on Synodality is being initiated with this ecumenical flourish. Sister Nathalie Berkat from the Synod of Bishops has commented, "Synodality and ecumenism are two paths to be travelled together." Well, we will want them to reflect on what the task of ecumenism is in this context, and what the intention is that lies behind its invocation. For ecumenism is one of those nice words which suggest, amongst other values, a certain broad-mindedness, a warmth of heart, and a generosity of spirit, and indeed it is acting as a prelude for another activity that requires also broad-mindedness, interfaith encounters. For during the 3-day retreat that follows the ecumenical vigil, there will be both ecumenical and interfaith workshops. The Catholic representatives and ecumenical delegates, who are divided into 4 categories of participation, will be able to have encounters in seminars with each other, but also with Islam and Buddhism. The prescribed intention is to see what can be learnt from one another and from the other faiths. Well, there are of course 2 distinct philosophical outlooks in our rapidly evolving contemporary Western culture, and ecumenism looks different depending on which worldview you adopt, which lens you see through. In the older view, which preferences the language of objective propositional truth, the fracture with the Protestants, the larger of the ecumenical partners, was partly about the Protestant rejection of supernaturalism. The experience of the supernatural, though, has always been a characteristic of the Catholic Church. It had fueled the dynamic of evangelism as well as the faith and practice of the Church. At least it did until the Enlightenment arrived with a new pragmatic materialism, which deeply distrusted the miraculous and drove a greater wedge between matter and spirit and produced Protestantism. The confrontation between those Protestants who denied the miraculous both in the Mass and in the extended world of the material, and those Catholics who experienced it, celebrated and evangelized with it from the book of Acts onwards, has proved as difficult to explain as to overcome and heal. The newer view, which prefers the subjective and relative, sets out to solve the ecumenical Gordian knot by trying to dissolve it in a salve of niceness. But it's not obvious how attempts at simple compromise rather than persuasion and conversion can actually heal the ecumenical standoff. So if the new synodality and ecumenical ambition go hand in hand, what are Catholics intended to discover in and achieve from this ecumenical dimension at the Autumn Synod? Well, it's certainly true that there are aspects of Reformed spirituality that are indeed impressive and, in fact, lacking in the Catholic Church. An intimacy and familiarity with the Bible has marked evangelicalism and become a powerful factor in resisting secularism. And equally, the energising of the laity has been much more a quality of Reformed spirituality than Catholic practice. Both of these could be resources for a renewed Catholicism, as could the fervour and pneumatic intimacy of Pentecostalism. It's one of the very few growing Protestant churches. But are these the intended ecumenical discoveries? Because there is always also the dull, secularised, politicised preoccupations of liberal Protestantism, with sex, world peace and social justice on its mind. But these are characteristics of dying churches. Has the new synodality developed a charism of discernment to value the spirituality of growing Protestant churches and beware the preoccupations of the dying ones? Well, if so, there are no signs of it in Instrumentum Laboris, where we ought to be able to look for it. So what are the lessons that the ecumenical dimensions of the Synod intend to present? A familiarity with the Bible and the Holy Spirit, or a fixation with sex, politics and ecclesial decay. For too long, that they may all be one has been understood not as being about organic unity with Jesus through his appointment of Peter, but instead a homage to the nice, that they may all get on better. One set of ecclesial values being quite as authentic as another, since there's no scale of historically validated truth to assess them by. The inevitable fear of many observers is that the working document for the continental stage and instrumentum laboris show a preference for the old integrity of encounter over the hard work of discerning which values are genuinely Catholic and Christian and which aren't. But things are more complex than that, because we are at a particular hinge of history where relativism is being replaced with a new and different kind of dogmatism. What is popularly described as wokery has none of the humility of relativism, but instead displays all the ambitions of a new series of objective propositions that brook no opposition. It turns out that instrumentum laboris doesn't just propose a flat hierarchy of subjectivity, but does, after all, value truth. But it's the truth not of the claims of the Catholic faith, but of the new cultural order. It's the truth of diversity, inclusion and equity, and this paradoxically makes the task of contemporary ecumenism very much easier than the relativistic mutual admiration of the nice. For all the liberal Protestant denominations have also energetically embraced the progressive project of making heaven on earth by means of pursuing global justice, ecological purity and re-education for all. Is it intended the new cultural order should offer a glue capable of mending old historical divisions and healing past mutual misunderstandings? Is the universal religious devotion to a single view of Marx intended to replace some multiple historically diverging attractions to different versions of Jesus of ecumenical history? The ambitions of the new synodality are not, however, restricted to refreshing the waters of ecumenical encounter. Once the new synodalism has had the opportunity to engage in the mutual admiration of sub-Christian progressivism in an ecumenical context, the delegates or participants will be offered the opportunity to learn from other faiths. The 3-day retreat, acting as a period of preparation, will provide encounters with Islam and Buddhism. In the world of interfaith spirituality, there are certain 20th century tropes of appreciation which provide the norms of civilized interfaith dialogue. This glass-half-full culture celebrates the Islamic capacity for the discipline of timetable prayer at one end of the scale and a penchant for mysticism which informs Sufism at the other end of the scale. Will the participants also be invited to encounter the Islamic suppression of women and the disastrous execution of Christians for alleged blasphemy all over the world? Buddhists are conventionally praised for their dedication to inclusivity and aversion of dogmatism, though the more alert amongst us will remember more warily the cul-de-sac that Thomas Merton led so many into in his journey towards the edge of syncretism. It's considered the height of interfaith impoliteness to recollect that the underlying repudiation of Jesus and the authority of the Christian scriptures is what provides the dominant religious narrative for both Islam and Buddhism in their relationship with Christianity. So perhaps the intention is to learn to appreciate more profoundly the gift of the unveiling of the mind behind the universe as our tender and intimate Father through the Holy Spirit, in contrast to the vacuum of intimate personhood that Buddhism presupposes, and the unknowability and raw compelling power of Allah in Islam. The task of learning anything substantial from other faiths may be a deeper one than interfaith politeness envisages being possible. There will only be a few hours of encounter on the timetable, yet any sensible encounter makes or ought to make demands requiring much more substantial reading, religious bilingualism and theological exploration. What can be done in a few hours? Anything less than that suggests that what's on offer is only a cosmetic encounter, designed to big up the credentials of the event, rather than offer a more profound discovery of the other. But we'll never know. Secrecy has been imposed to hide the pilgrimage into both interfaith and interreligious syncretism. At the heart of the whole process of the new synodalism, there emerges a gap that begs vital questions, so that it's hard to know what can be achieved without first of all confronting these issues head on, and they are to do with the question of authority and epistemology. In the series of mutual encounters that are going to take place between the representatives of conservative Catholicism and those who favour sexualised inclusion, between those who value hierarchy and those who want to destroy it, between those who treasure the supernatural and those who are more comfortable with the political, between those who are devoted to the Sacred Heart of Jesus and those who are drawn to alternative heartbeats, which value system is going to prevail. And when the secrecy is lifted and the included have been embraced but not changed, the marginalised have been moved to the new centre, marginalising others of course, and the powerless have gained the traction they coveted, presumably ejecting their predecessors and making them impotent, we will discover whether or not Catholicism has survived the transition into the hypersexualised utopian instrumentum laboris presupposed. The question remains, as it always does, who in this synodal encounter will convert whom?